A very good morning to all our dear listeners and viewers from outside. Welcome to another edition of The Other Perspective. Today we are going to be discussing about the 36 years of NRM, gains or losses. But before we proceed, we want to pay tribute to the Professor Emmanuel Mutebile, who left us, who passed on Sunday. He was the governor of Uganda for the last 2 decades. We want to condole with his family during these trying moments. He was one of the brains behind revamping Uganda's economy. May his soul rest in peace. As I had initially started, NRM is celebrating 36 years in power. They captured power after a long protracted 5-year war, Bush War, which brought them to power in 1986. President Museveni, while addressing the nation in 1986 January, promised Ugandans that let me quote him verbatimly, where he assured Ugandans that no one should think that what is happening today is a mere change of guard. It's a fundamental change in the politics of our country. And the fundamental change they promised Ugandans came with a lot of 10-point programs, which they wanted to govern Uganda on and change the country, because they thought that Uganda was misgoverned and a lot of suffering was there among Ugandans. So they promised Ugandans a lot. So 36 years down the road, we want to interrogate and look at some of the things NRM have done, whether they have really delivered in their promises or most of the things were just promises that were not actually delivered, and Ugandans may still need more to come from them. So we are going to be having a discussion around the 36 years of NRM, looking at the gains and losses through their 36 years in power. We are going to have 3 discussants joining us in this discussion. First is Mr. Henry Muguzi, who is an expert in electoral democracy and also a human rights activist. Henry has seen the NRM through its entire tenure in power, and I know he will give us very good insights about the NRM regime, because he has lived through the entire regime of NRM and he has a lot of experiences and lessons from this very regime. We shall also have Priska Wanyenya, who is a journalist who reports from Parliament, and she's passionate about rule of law and governance, and I know she will also give us some of the insights on what she has been covering during this time of NRM in power. And then we shall also be joined by Moses Chidega. Moses Chidega is part of the National Youth Council. Is a labor affairs minister in the National Youth Council, and also a member of the National Youth League of NRM. So he's going to bring that perspective of NRM and how he thinks NRM has delivered, whether NRM has really delivered to its promises. So I'm going to start with Mr. Henry Muguzi. You have lived and seen NRM from the time it came into power, and I know you've also seen some other regimes which have been there before. I would like you to sum up the last 36 years of NRM. How would you sum up the last 36 of NRM rule?
Thank you, Abel, and to you viewers, wherever you are joining us from, it's a pleasure to be with you to discuss this very interesting topic, a topic where we celebrate, we commemorate 36 years of the NRM. It's of course an onerous task to sum up the eventful years, 36 years, in just 1 hour. But we try to do our best. When the NRM came into office, I think I was in P7. So that was the time I was trying to look around. And all along, it's the only regime I have seen really critically. But to try and sum this up, Abel, I remember there are quite a number of things we need we can point out, and I hope and I'm happy that my other colleagues will allude to this. Number one, I think we need to celebrate the political stability that the NRM has ushered in. Prior to the coming of the NRM government, Uganda was going through turmoil, and there was lots of uncertainty. You would not know what would happen tomorrow. As such, we would not attract investors, and because we would not attract investors, the state in which we lived was so sorry, and therefore that we have lived through 36 years of political stability is something we need to treasure about. Now, you remember, until 1986, Uganda was one of the leading exporters of refugees. Today, we are one of the leading importers of refugees. So we are a destination where people are coming to seek refuge. That has to be applauded. The other thing I want to applaud is economic stability. At the time of the coming of the NRM, the economy was in shutters. We've been speaking about the rise in fuel prices, but I remember my father used to tell me that those days prior to the coming of NRM, you would actually not tell, prices would rise every day. The currency would be devalued every day. And therefore, that they came in and tried to stabilize the economy. It was not easy. Of course, their stabilization of the economy has its own misgivings, but that they have been able to stabilize the economy is something very we need to applaud. The peace, people often say right now, 12 o'clock, that we are able to sleep. Because back in the day,
I am not getting Henry very well. I don't know whether your network, Henry, is not so stable. You're kind of breaking.
Oh, I think it's network. But let's proceed. The peace they brought into office is also something else we need to applaud them. But if I may go back to the economy, the fact that they were able to bring privatization. I think privatization has ushered in by the advisors of the NRM regime, and of course earlier on we paid the tribute to the departed former governor of the Bank of Uganda, who was instrumental to ensuring that Uganda opens up its doors. I remember so vividly that when President Museveni came into office, he was struggling to identify people he would work with. I remember he worked with the academics. I remember the late Professor Chesimila, who was a renowned economist. But things were not working out until a team from the Ministry of Finance, led by Emmanuel Tumusiime Mutebile, stepped forward to advise, and the economy has been stable. Now, by going privatization, I think that's another thing we need to applaud them for, because privatization ushered in an era of development that the regime has superintended over. But of course, let me also point out to the negatives. The negatives are also quite a lot, because we look at the rule of law. For example, one of the things that took the NRM to the bush was to ensure that they restore democracy and the rule of law. Right now, when you try to analyze the status of the rule of law in Uganda, just yesterday, the Uganda Law Society put out their status report on the rule of law. Now, the rule of law is something you're not doing very well at all. That you have extrajudicial killings emerging in the later days of the regime, that you have people being, the courts releasing people on bail, and the people get to be rearrested in a manner that does not really speak to the respect for the rule of law. That people who are trying to participate in their own elections and elect their own people get to be treated in a manner that we are beginning to see, which also speaks about the kind of democracy that they're trying to push, which we think has issues. We also so in terms of the rule of law, I think there's a lot to be done there, and it also speaks about the failure to understand that democracy, as they ushered it in, and as it stands out as one of the 10 points program, the points on the 10 points program, requires a regime that is tolerant. This regime doesn't seem to be tolerant. We talk about the proliferation of districts, which now is a huge burden. It levies a huge burden on the taxpayer of Uganda. At the time of NRM was coming, I think we had about 50 districts. Right now, it's 140. I think I've lost count. So, and these districts which have become objects of patronage because they cannot support themselves. They have to be beholden to the center to get those central government transfers, which in principle, renders them almost useless. The rise in domestic debt, we do know that whereas the economy, I think up to the year 2000, the president made sure that people who had political interests did not get anywhere near the Ministry of Finance and gave room to the technocracy in the macroeconomic institutions to stabilize the economy. I think from the middle 2000s, politics started to rein in. And right now, I think we are doing a lot massive borrowing. We appropriate supplementary budgets as if we've been bewitched, because how do you get to appropriate a supplementary budget 1 month into the new financial year? These things, and then you do them perpetually as if you don't learn. I think these are things that we can speak about. Corruption. Corruption was point number 7 on the 10-point program. Without going very far, you remember when the new Inspector General of Government was trying to be creative, and she spoke about introducing what she called a lifestyle audit. You remember what the head of state advised her to do? That you have to go sit on these corrupt. So literally what happened, excuse me, literally what happened there was that the statements that came from the head of state were received in a sense that he was trying to condone corruption. So corruption has remained a problem. The institutions have broken down. The institutional framework has broken down. Institution right now, if I asked you to point out an institution that is working and functioning normally, you will struggle. So the breakdown of the institutional framework, that now everything is dependent on the decisions and intervention of the one man who has been in power for 36 years. I think that's also something to take from. Lastly, I think all said and done, the good of everything is that they've been able to sprint over a legacy, and I think this is the most important part, because the investment in infrastructure is phenomenal. They've opened up roads that link the entire country. Right now, you can drive from Arua to Kisoro on tarmac. Moroto is connected. So I think the dams they have constructed and so on, I think the legacy of this regime going forward, the legacy of President Museveni has to be infrastructure, the roads. I think he's done something on roads that not many people will have to. But lastly, as I conclude, if you will, I think it should be clear that the first 10 years of the NRM regime were really very challenging, because these people who had no experience in statecraft inherited an economy that was in shambles, and therefore it took them a lot of time to fix the economy. Secondly, they were learning on job. It took them a lot of time to master the dynamics of running a state, and therefore, and thirdly, there was the misleading from the Bretton Woods sisters, IMF and World Bank, who had promised to help Uganda revamp the economy, but in the first 10, 15 years, their investment was not commensurate with the promises they had given the country, until the president said, let me go China, let me go east and find China. I think there are certain years we lost. But so all in all, it's been 36 years of mixed achievements. There's good and also there's the bad. Back to you, Abel.
Thank you so much, Henry. I think, Priska, you've just had Henry's submission of where he has talked about some of the gains NRM has achieved, and also there are those other sides where they have not necessarily delivered as they had promised. So you, as one of the Ugandans who has been around and also been reporting on some of the things the government has been doing. How would you sum up NRM in terms, especially in the parameter of security, and also other things you think they have scored, they have gained, or and also those other ones where maybe they have not done so well as they had promised?
Thank you, Abel, for hosting me once again for this week's show. And I was Henry's submission. He was kind of breaking almost a bigger part of it. He was breaking on and off, but when you're looking at, when you're trying to gauge the performance of NRM, I think we should look back to the 10 points program that the president gave us when he was taking power. And when I was making research for the show, I looked at the 10 points program, and I was vis-a-vis the performance and the issues that I took interest in was security and the economy. That because when he talked about the security, democracy, and I measure, because currently we are undergoing the budget process in Parliament, and security has been the biggest topic this time around, and mostly the DRC, the Operation Shuja. So when you look at the current budget, a presentation that of which I have a copy, that was presented by the Minister of Finance, and when they look at the resource envelope allocation, we are now operating a program-based budgeting. So security has been lumped together with governance, and they are projecting to allocate it 6.184 trillion. That is 22%, 22.7% of the whole budget. It's taking the lion's share, the security. And when you look at the situation that Uganda is undergoing, the COVID pandemic, you ask yourself whether security is the highest priority, because right now everyone is talking about the economy recovering, opening the night economy and everything. So, and the next after security comes, that is when health and education have been lumped together. That is Human Development Index. That is 6.1. So security is, and the security component alone is taking 4 trillion, because they've lumped it together with governance. And when the Minister of Defense appeared before the committee, they were saying, you have given us about 4 trillion, but there are funding priorities of over 3 trillion that you've not given us. So we are looking at a security budget of 7 trillion. And so, and when one of the during, of course, I'm now giving a summary of the debate in Parliament, and one of the issues that came out was they need about 406 billion to fund the AMISOM. And that is why the MPs were asking, why should the taxpayers in Uganda fund the terrorist fight in Somalia? One of them said, Somalia is not even our neighbor. Why is it our business? And so it has raised questions on whether African Union and UN have stopped funding the AMISOM troops in Somalia. And we are talking, when the ministry said that the AMISOM troops were last paid in March, this current financial, that means March 2021. So this whole period have not been paid. But when you look at the security situation, the funding that is given to the security itself, vis-a-vis the perception of how Ugandans perceive the security forces in the country, it's coming at the time when this author Kwizera he was kidnapped yesterday after being given bail. So and during the debate in Parliament, one Sechikubo asked the army that when did insulting the commander land forces ever become a crime? That he can understand the president, they might be a charge, but how is insulting the commander land forces, and that is a question that the UPDF didn't respond, so we don't know what. So when you look at the money that is being spent in security vis-a-vis the perception, most Ugandans that I know that have witnessed the violence that has taken emitted against them by the security, they don't really see the value for money from security. And even for the few people that I've talked to, even the fellow journalists, it's hard for them to believe this ADF story. Even when you look at the reactions on internet, people think security, the ADF thing is just a creation, a cohort for someone to whatever, to steal money. And during the submission in the budget committee, one MP asked that asked the UPDF there is an allegation that for the equipment that is in Somalia, the UN and the AU are paying Uganda rent for the equipment. But for the 5 to 6 years that I've covered Parliament, I've not seen NTR from the army, because NTR is the money you have collected on some of the services you've rendered. I usually see the one for police, but I've not seen the one for the UPDF. So he was asking who takes this money. So for the time that the UPDF has been there, they have been renting. They've been paying for equipment, but we've not seen the money. So the whole security thing, yes, people can talk of the Uganda being secure, you can move at night, but there is this allegation that absence of war does not mean peace as such, because when one author is abducted and it has become a trend, because we are all now living our lives on the edge. Even when we appear on these talk shows, we are restrained on what we can talk or what we cannot talk, because you never know, even as you get out here, you'll be picked for saying something. So the perception of how people have perceived the respect of people give to the security forces is deteriorating. And even the only response that the army gives us is acts of few individuals. But if these few individuals keep on accumulating their acts, and that acts that are leading to some people losing their lives and their humanity, it even when it tends to bring me to question the security that people talk about, that it was ushered in by the NRM.
I want to bring in Mr. Moses Chidega. I don't know whether he's on, but I wanted him to respond to some of these submissions from Priska and Henry, because there are some areas they are giving credit, and then there are some areas they are still thinking NRM has not done so well, especially if you are talking about security, but we are still seeing the security forces are the ones in charge of brutalizing citizens and also kidnapping and beating citizens. So some of the things which they promised to usher in and make sure the country is governed in a better way is not still being done. So I think Chidiga is not yet around, but I want to go back to Henry. Number one pillar in the 10-point program of NRM when they just came into power was restoration of democracy. And you are an expert in the area of electoral democracy. Where does Uganda stand in terms of democratic progression from the last 36 years? Where would you put Uganda?
Thank you, Abel. And I hope now I can be audible, because Priska hinted that the previous time I was breaking. I hope now I'm not breaking.
You're audible
to
enough.
confirm. Now, so in terms of security, Abel, I mean in terms of democracy, Abel, I have listened to Mr. Museveni swearing in over and over, I have listened to the speeches he started with, and of course, the democracy was reigning supreme on the agenda of whatever he came to change. And when he said he was not going to be a mere change of guards, democracy was going to be one of the pillars that would tell whether or not it hasn't been a mere change of guards. Now, you will recall that for the up until 1990, up until 2001, elections in Uganda were conducted under one-party rule. Now, when elections are conducted under one-party rule, there cannot be democracy, which is why we often say that conducting elections does not mean there is democracy, because you can conduct elections without there being democracy. The semblance of a return to true democracy takes place in 2005, when we return to multi-party political dispensation. Now, but you see, merely opening up for political parties without allowing them space to mobilize, organize, identify leaders, nurture leaders, present their philosophy, market their philosophy, is not enough. What we have seen for the longest time, from the time we returned to multi-party, we've seen a situation where political parties are not allowed space to organize, to mobilize, to sell their ideology. We live in a situation where political parties are not even there. The Political Parties and Organizations Act put a cap on the amount of money political parties can access from a single source. But also the head of state is on record. I think one time he was swearing in, was it 2011, when he promised that come 2022, come 2021, there will be no political party standing. But as if that is not enough, to be a candidate for the opposition party in Uganda is almost analogous to committing a crime, because police will pick you up, mishandle you, mime you, deny you space. In the recent election campaigns, we had countless instances where the security operatives denied opposition presidential candidates access to campaign grounds inside the districts. You cannot have democracy without respect for the rule of law. A situation where the rule of law, a situation where some people think that they're above the law, cannot be a good situation for democracy. We understand that the British jurist Van Dijk, when he spoke about the rule of law, he said it has to be a situation where nobody is above the law. In Uganda, there are a group of people who have kept the rule of law at their whims and caprices. That is not good for democracy. You cannot say there is democracy. You cannot say there is democracy when there is excessive use of money to control voter consent, use of money to disorganize political parties, use of money to make sure that things don't actually operate as they should. You cannot speak about democracy when the citizenry is kept civically incompetent, the citizenry is poor, education, which is a key, is a prerequisite of democracy, because democracy presupposes that it's important that the citizenry understand and appreciate the relevance and rationale of electing leaders. But a situation where you have citizens who are illiterate means that the electorate are unable to identify the leaders that they desire. Instead, they've been voting the leaders they deserve, because of those incompetencies. A situation where you don't have a legal framework that allows people who to criticize government. How can you, in a situation where people criticizing government is equivalent to a crime? People like Kakwenza, who is in who is facing the brunt of the misuse of the rule of law. I will tell you that this regime has failed in ensuring that there is balance, and regime is quite intolerant. So you cannot be intolerant and practice democracy. So those points I have mentioned and many others paint a picture that democracy in Uganda is in a sorry state. Actually, the democratization process is undergoing stagnation. Back to you, Abel.
Okay, thank you. And before we go for a break, I want you to respond to this. You have just talked about how NRM has not allowed other political parties to mobilize, organize, recruit, and also be like actors that are trying to ensure that the country is governed very well. But we have seen very many pundits have also come out blaming the opposition political parties that they are not so prepared in terms of taking the mantle to lead the country or being government in waitings in a more meaningful and good way, because most of them are being blamed to just be creating these political parties for their own survival interests. So do you blame NRM for even making sure that for these political parties whereby the owners create them purposefully for making a killing out of the political parties, but they don't have any intentions of necessarily trying to topple the NRM from being in power?
Thank you very much, Abel. As you were presenting your question, my mind ran to the book, the book written by Francis Imbuga. The title is Betrayal in the City. In there is a verse that says that when the madness of a nation disturbs the solitary mind, it is not enough to say that the man is mad. What you are seeing is a signs of desperation, because political parties have been equipped left, right, and center and denied the space, and because it has also dawned on them that hook or crook, they will not be allowed this space. They have also started to behave in a way and manner that presents a group of people that are disturbed. What we are seeing, that some of them have decided to also sell themselves, to put themselves on sale as if they were commodities, that they're able to cross onto into the party in power, all exist in their parties as moles, are all indicators, are all creatures of a situation where political parties have been denied space, and there is no indicator, there is no light at the end of the tunnel, that for as long as the NRM regime is still in place, political parties shall receive this. But also, we cannot deny the fact that within political parties, there are people who have commoditized being in opposition, and therefore they are there for economic gain. So the whole notion of disruption and the miscoordination and behaving in a way that some people may think we are mad is a result of us not being allowed space, no freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. There's one thing, Abel, I should mention and allow me space. Before the NRM came into power, the colonial masters, and up until 1986, had created spaces, physical spaces, all over the country. Some of these spaces were bomber grounds, which were existent in every district. Every district had a bomber ground. Those were physical spaces for the citizenry to assemble and reflect on the things that are disturbing their minds. In Kampala, we had the Constitutional Square, formerly State Square. We have the Centenary Pub, the Centenary Park, and many others. The NRM regime has closed these physical spaces. If you go to any bomber ground, the only thing you will see is this huge number of those military vehicles that carries tear gas and so on. Here in Kampala, the Constitutional Square is a no-go area. You cannot assemble there. By closing physical spaces, they have denied us the right to assemble, because those were places that were put in place and reserved for citizens to assemble. And by denying us space to assemble, then it is very difficult to organize, mobilize, and do anything as citizens. Back to you, Abel.
Thank you so much, and we are now going to go for a short break, and then we shall return with more of the discussion.
Welcome, my people. A cup of coffee, please. There is tea, everything, snacks are on the way.
Your thanks, but the reason that's why we are here, our people need improve different services. We at least need an ambulance at every center free.
My sub-county is the forest. We used to depend on the former MP's vehicle, but when he lost his elections, he took away his vehicle.
Of course.
So what does that mean?
Use your budget as a district to procure the ambulances.
If I could, I would. But unfortunately, government operates differently.
What are you saying, Chairperson? This is very serious and urgent.
Yes, I know. And why are they called local leaders then?
Local government.
You people, who sent you here?
I know, of course. We are concerned citizens who are watching people dying every day.
We've lost our beloved ones just because of poor health services.
Something has to be done.
You are right. Something has to be done, and very fast.
Yes.
That's transport for you. Go back.
But
All your concerns are taken care of. I will handle.
But
Have a
Chairman,
safe journey.
Thank you so much.
but this man seems to undermine our cause as to why we're here.
No, don't misunderstand me. This is just transport, no strings attached.
Chairman, we came here to discuss and find solution to our problems. But it seems you don't want to engage with us. Let's go and mobilize people, and you will see how serious we are.
Good citizens, let us always hold our leaders accountable. Leadership is a service, not a privilege.
Contribute today at www.politicalfinanceafrica.org/donate. Together, we can contribute towards enhancing democracy as a viable system of governance in Uganda.
Welcome back from that short break. We are today discussing about the 36 years of NRM, looking at their gains and losses. Before we went for the break, Andrew was giving us his view about democracy, the restoration of democracy in Uganda. And that was one of the number one pillars NRM had promised Uganda, and he has given his opinion. And I would also like to know from Priska on how she thinks NRM has scored in terms of restoration of democracy, and also the number 7 pillar, which was elimination of corruption and misuse of power. I would want you to share with us how NRM has scored in those in those areas, especially democracy, corruption, and misuse of power.
Thanks so much, Abel. Because right now, when the NRM is in Wakiso, I think, I'm not so sure where the celebrations are taking place. I'm so sorry about that mishap. But the celebrations come at a time when our very own author was kidnapped yesterday. after he was given bail. And when you look at the terms of the bail conditions that the magistrate had set out, Richard Abashaija was ordered not to speak about his jail condition as part of the bail terms. But even when he was given those stringent bail conditions, he was kidnapped. So you are looking at a magistrate who was trying to appease the complainant, but in the end, even her her efforts were quashed, and that speaks about the how they are using powers. And you know, when this whole thing of Rich Rabashaija came about, some people in Kenya asked that you people, the first son has a lot of say in what takes place in the country. That cannot happen to our country. I bet there are some Kenyans who don't even know the names of the children of Uhuru Kenyatta. So that tells you of how much a joke the country has become. And yesterday, the shadow minister for finance told the budget committee that the security forces, police, spends 20 billion shillings to quash one single riot in Uganda. It's the sound, one of the sound bites that I heard in the morning when I was making my research, because I am the reality is yet to sink in for me, because 20 billion shillings to quell one single riot. I am living in denial. I've listened to the sound 5 times, hoping that Chivumbi misspoke, but it's 20. I'll have to go back and listen again. So that is that is the level of the misuse of power that this country has gotten. Because you look at what 20 billion shillings would do for our education system or the medicines. When you go to the cancer institute and you see how badly the patients are, you'd never wish to have even the disease cancer, even the word cancer come out from your tongue. But this is the money being used to quell one single riot. And how many do we have? So, and some of the NRM MPs were defending the amount. They were saying, but what do you deal with scenarios where one presidential candidate is insisting that he won an election? If you're the president, what would you do? That is the level we have gotten to, because for them, you you have to spend anything, you do whatever, hook or crook, for you to do what? For you to stay on power. We have reached a level whereby people are simply drunk on power. People are simply drunk on power. Abel, I really need to compose myself on that 20 billion figure. I've not yet gotten to terms with it. But I was more interested in when you look from the very start of my submission, I talked about the 20-point program. And when you were looking at the democracy about it, so but when this figure was brought, the NRM MPs were like, it's fine, the money has to be spent for the stability. But Chivumbi told them that why are these for rioting in the first place? Because you are organizing a sham election. But if you organize an election that everyone believed in, you would not be having those riots in the first place. That you're justifying. But when you look at the fifth point of the 10 points program that the NRM gave us, the one for consolidating our economy, we having an independent economy, that one has now, I think they have scored the lowest when it comes to those 10 points program. Because when you look, the point says building an independent economy, integrated and a self-sustaining economy. As per now, our debt is now 73 trillion. That is as per October. And when you look at it, between June and October, it rose for about 1 trillion. So, and most of the loans are non-concessional because the lenders are shying away from giving Uganda any more loans, the concessional loans. So now they are going into the market, the commercial banks in Uganda. They are the ones now currently who are lending government. And that is why when you, Henry, goes for a loan for your business, you be your and government brings your papers, your loan application will be pushed down because here government is giving them treasury bonds and everything. So that is why now for you to get a loan that suits into your business, it is going to be hard because government has crowded out the private sector. You are getting loans for over 25% interest, and how 25, and that is probably the least. And so when you look at, and now the debt, the debt management has risen to now, has risen from 8 trillion that we spent about 5 years ago. That was in 2017. Now we have a debt management amount of about 15 trillion. That is what we are going to use to finance our debts, pay interest. And so I think that when it comes to the economy, we score lowest. I saw someone called Eddie comment about the economy being good and there is good balance of trade, and I didn't know what he was basing on to say that our balance of trade is good, because the last report, the Ministry of Finance used to release the performance of economy reports, but of late I don't know what has happened to the Ramadan regime. But the last one I checked in November, it showed that we exported goods of 288 million US dollar. That's around 1 trillion. But the ones we imported in were about 511 million US dollars. That is around 1.8. So I don't know which good balance of trade he was meaning. I think he needs to explain to us, because that really shows that we are importing more than we are exporting. And the difference is about 222 million US dollars. That's a very big figure for someone to come out and say we are having a good trade balance. He will really need to clarify on some of the issues. But I tend to make my submissions around the happenings in Parliament, because that's where I mostly be. Because in this very week we learned that our tax exemptions, the exemptions are worth 7.7 trillion. That is VAT, customs, income tax. You can imagine somebody exempted from VAT, because I do know that VAT is attached on a goods. For instance, if there is VAT on sugar, that has to be factored into the what? Into the cost of sugar. If there is a VAT over, say, 100 shillings per kilo, then they will have to add on if I'm paying 3,100, that is VAT. And what the manufacturer has to do is to forward that money to URA. But there are companies that have been exempted from paying VAT, and that is to a tune of 2 trillion. But we are looking at.
I want now to bring Henry also on some of what, to clarify on some of the things you've shared with us. I'll bring you back. Allow me to cut you short. Henry, you've just had Priska discuss about the debt increment in Uganda, whereby now we have around 76 trillion which we need to pay, and in the last previous year you saw 15 trillion was allocated for only debt management. And we have very many people have been alluding most of the money has been mismanaged. That's why we are not utilizing the money very well, and we end up paying a lot of interest in servicing some of these debts. And one of the pillars NRM pointed out when they came into power was elimination of corruption. How would you rate their performance if we are seeing the debt is continuing to escalate? They promised us also an independent, integrated, and self-sustaining economy, but we are still financing most of our things using money we borrow. We are so indebted as a country. How would you rate them in terms of elimination of corruption and also integrating an independent, self-sustaining economy?
Thank you very much, Abel. Priska raises some very interesting points. I want to start on the point of the statement made by the new Inspector General of Government, Honorable Betty Olivukana, when she said that her office estimates that through corruption, government of Uganda is losing more than 10 trillion shillings annually. So if you only fought corruption, you would have 10 trillion saved there. That money would go a long way in helping you to build an independent, integrated, self-sustaining economy, which they promised in 1986, but which we have not been able to see. Now, you would recall that in the year 2000, there were efforts championed by civil society that brought pressure to bear on bilateral and multilateral lenders who cancelled the debts Uganda was owing through HIPC 1 and HIPC 2. HIPC is highly indebted poor countries initiatives. So by 2000, the year 2000, the debts that Uganda had contracted since independence, and those are close to 40 years, were cancelled. And those debts were not anywhere near the 75 trillion we're talking about today. In just 20 years, Uganda has contracted a debt of up to 75 trillion. And in fact, if our budget is 45 trillion, and the money we are using to service the debt is 15 trillion, it means up to 38% of our budget is going to debt servicing. But as if that is not enough, the wastefulness, the profligacy, the self-enrichment, the thieving and stealing of resources meant for public good has escalated to the extent that today Uganda ranks as one of the most corrupt countries in the world, a feat we have been on for the last 20 years, and we seem to be happy to be classified in the league of the most corrupt countries. So when it comes to corruption, Uganda scores very badly, but we cannot have a self-sustaining, independent, integrated, self-sustaining economy when we have not dealt with corruption. Because with corruption, all the resources are pilfering. I want to also emphasize the point of misuse of power. What we are seeing today, and mark you citizens, if it has not reached you, if it's on Lukirabashaiza today, tomorrow it will be me or you. Because what goes around comes around. The misuse of state institutions and state power to cajole, to violate the rights of citizens, to treat them as if they are not citizens. That is going to continue, and that's a minus. I want to speak about the issue of the balance of trade, which Priska again articulated very well. We are rated as one of the countries that have very good climate, very good soils. But up to today, we are still importing rice, we are importing carrots, we are importing wheat, we are importing even the things we should produce. And therefore, this has brought about an imbalance of trade. And I agree with you, Priska, there's nothing like balance of trade here. Balance of trade where? These are some of the areas where we have completed failure, and therefore we wait to see when the promised land, which is the self-sustaining, the integrated, independent, self-sustaining economy will come to pass. Because right now you have wealth concentrated in the hands of very few people. So very few people are allowed the right to enjoy economic obesity, while the rest of the citizenry, the biggest number of the citizens, is wallowing in a marshmallow of poverty and disease. This should not be tolerated. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Henry. Priska, we've just heard Henry talk about how so many of the Ugandans are wallowing in poverty, and NRM still under, now they have the 4 pillars which they're looking at. That is democracy, Pan-Africanism, and then their socio-economic transformation of the economy. And I want to us to discuss more about the socio-economic transformation of Ugandans in terms of poverty elevation. We have seen they have injected a lot of money on various programs like Entandikwa, Operation Wealth Creation, those things of like Myoga, all those things which were intended to improve on the livelihoods of Ugandans. How has the government scored in the last 36 years in terms of elevating Ugandans out of poverty?
Thank you, Abel. Still, now you've articulated well on the various programs that are brought, and the mere fact that there are many, in that you don't even have enough time to even count all of them, it gives you a glimpse of the performance. Because the latest one is now the parish model, and the civil society has told them to first go slow on implementing it nationwide. They want the trial to be held in about 2 districts before it can be rolled out. But the government seems to be hell bent on implementing the parish model. And the parish model was designed by the current secretary to the treasury. So this is his baby. I don't know how they are going to respond to this, but many people think that it's now time for the local people to now eat, not only the people in Kampala to eat. That is the argument they are saying about the parish model. I'm yet to await on its performance, but I can't really tell you that I am hopeful that it will bring about the radical change in the country. And when Henry hinted about Uganda having good climate, if you've taken note of what is happening in social media, the Prime Minister was yesterday on NBS and was trying to compare Uganda to Kenya and saying Uganda is a very blessed country, something of the sort, that we have good weather as compared to Kenya that has winter. So now Kenyans are on our cases asking Uganda, are you okay? And the reactions of Ugandans are like, we are not okay. So that is now the trend. So maybe that is where the person who talked about the good balance of payments picked up from the weather. But when as one of my closing remarks, when you ask about the economic transformation, they are yet to hit the target, even to show, because you really see the Ugandans are hustling, even when there is no criteria as to how the tax exemptions or the loans are given. If you want support from government, because you have to know someone. So at the absence of that, the criteria or the guidelines that government uses for you to even benefit from things like Emiogan, you've seen when such projects are taken back to the ground in the communities, the people think that it's now time for us to eat because the people in Kampala have eaten enough. That is why some of those funds have failed to take off, to create the impact that they were their intended impact at the time of establishment. Let's wait for for the takeoff of the parish model. It's not that I have so much hope in it, but I thought the civil society was making a good argument. Let's roll it in first 2 districts, we see, pilot it, and we see what is going to happen. I think that would be a good idea, that if government took it up upon, the problem will be on which districts will take first or which one will not take. But the NRM will, when, as my parting shots, has a lot to do when it comes to it, because you can't even, you look at their 10 points program, there is none you can even give a score of about 30, or there is always a side, a negative side that you have to look at. Okay, the security has done, but this is this and this, so they have a lot to do, and I don't know how much time they have, because now you have almost been in power for almost 40 years and you're still struggling to even attain any of the 10 points. And someone has said the very people who are holding the political prisoners captive are now people in Pololo praying for the country, so they really have a lot of work to do to convince Ugandans that they really liberated them, and this public holiday is worth the effort.
Thank you so much, Patra. Henry, your parting shot, as you also hint on something about the education sector, as you give your parting shot.
Yeah, of course, the education sector, if it was not for the private investors to invest money and take care of the Ugandans who would never have access to this education, would not be having anything to speak home about. But I think I also want to highlight the point of Pan-Africanism, which I think they are failing badly, because how do you speak about Pan-Africanism when you cannot even afford, you cannot even manage to establish good relations between you and Rwanda? I don't know about that one. And lastly, on the issue of NRM having to do a lot, I think the risk a situation where they would become like the Bachuez, because the Bachuez came and left just as they came, they just disappeared. Because if you are celebrating 36 years and when you look around, it's you and your cronies that have gathered. The rest of the citizenry are wallowing, crying, they are mourning. The dear ones who have been incarcerated under conditions that are questionable. I think they need to refine their political and economic compass as a regime. It's been a pleasure to be on this show, Abel. That will be my parting shot.
Thank you so much, Henry and Priska, and to all our dear viewers outside there. It has been a great show. We have been looking at the 36 years of NRM, the gains and losses, but a lot needs to be done, as our panelists have already shared. The NRM has not done so much, and they need to make sure that they really fulfill some of the promises they make. And Ugandans are still waiting to see whether they will really perform in a better way. As you've heard from our guests, they don't think NRM has performed so well to the expectations of Ugandans, and they want them to work more and deliver to ensure that Ugandans really live in a country which they believe is more progressive and democratic in nature, and also the economy is self-sustaining. We shouldn't have a country whereby we rely so much on debt and on loans from other countries, and we keep on borrowing and borrowing. So I want to end it here, but we shall continue with the discussion on our various social media pages of ACFIM. On Facebook is ACFIM, on YouTube is ACFIM Uganda, and on Twitter is ACFIM UG. Let's continue the discussion. We shall have another round of the other perspective next week on Wednesday, same time. So keep tuned and keep following us on various social media platforms.